Okay, I think we're probably going to need to start.
Yeah.
Isaac.
Why don't you go ahead and get started?
Oh, okay.
To the boy who clung to the pillar, was it worth the sacrifice? That bitter, rigid pillar you held tight as the water flowed. That bitter, rigid pillar you held tight as the water danced and filled. You watched it rise while you reminisced. She should have been there. She made you a promise. Where was she now? Safe at home, thinking of you. You were loyal. She, discerning. You thought of her in your fleeting moments. You were faithful, boy who clung to the pillar. But I ask you, to what end?
I like this one.
Is it about Zoe? That was a serious question. I wasn't drinking.
No, it's about the Amalek. Which one was that, Isaac, or was it just something that Noah said that one time that was from another book? Was it one of the Amaleks, or was it just something Noah brought up during that story?
I mean, right now it's just a poem.
It's based off of
You guys trying
Like
to
a
just know that you know what you're
Chinese
talking
parable that is
Yeah.
not an Amalek, but it is actually mentioned in our translation in a commentary.
That's what I was
Yeah.
thinking of. Yeah, what do you remember which one that was?
No, I don't.
Because that's,
And that has something to do with
yeah.
the topic of trustworthiness.
But as a vice rather than a virtue.
As something done in Exodus, yeah.
As a vice, exactly. He's delete.
And is doing some silent criticism.
He read it as Riches.
Yeah.
Are there those who are unfamiliar with this story?
Yeah.
You remember. It might be beneficial, Isaac, to share the story, just so others have some more context.
Is everybody familiar with the story? I thought we mentioned
No, that's what I was saying. A couple people raised their hands there now.
Maybe I may have not.
You probably just don't remember it. Noah we mentioned it one time, the Alex we thought of her, in Tim's class. It was a couple months ago though.
it's a really short parable about the danger of being excessively trustworthy. So just a young guy and girl promised to meet up under a bridge at night, and that night a storm arises and there's danger of flooding. Of course there weren't smartphones back then, there's no way for them to communicate with each other. So the boy ends up still going under that bridge because he had made a promise to meet the girl there. But the girl stays home because it's really dangerous out. And the river under the bridge rises, but the boy remains there to the end, and he ends up perishing because the flood happened with the river. And so, who was in the right there? Who did the right thing? Was it the boy or was it the girl who broke her promise, more or less? But out of necessity and not out of actually a lack of trustworthiness per se. So it's a tragic story, obviously, but what it shows in part is that there's this, and it was shown as like being a youthful vice or tendency, but it's interesting that you used, and even we just corrected the word rigid that you used, because it comes from a very rigid way of thinking, a very shallow and foolish black and white way of understanding the practice of virtue as being this, like you guys know the word uncompromising. So you don't compromise, you don't lessen your idea of the way something should be, so that you still can consider yourself and be considered by others as virtuous. In this case, trustworthy. So, that's a recurrent theme in the intellects. Is there are times, even in the practice of virtue, to apply discernment. There's always that danger. I would say, especially in the doing of good deeds, or even in the practice of virtue, to fall into rigidity in your thinking. We were just talking about that in our previous class.
And I think rigidity can mean like practicing one thing without balancing it with others, right? Like loyalty is a good virtue, and so is discernment, but since not both of them were being practiced, it led to this perishing, right?
Right.
I had already offered some commentary when you had sent me this, but I'd like to again, because I've read it a couple times since then. First of all, I think the reference is pretty cool, and I also think it's cool how you did choose a virtue, but you showed it in its excess. Because like Noah was saying, loyalty, trustworthiness is virtuous, but when you could either say unrefined or taken to this extreme becomes a vice. And I think that's a very creative way to go about the assignment. But I think, as I said to you, what I appreciate most about this is that I don't know whether it was intentional or not on your part, but can see it as very autobiographical in a sense. I don't necessarily have to go into detail as of why, other than I can see your heart in it, and I can see you in it. And I am very encouraged for what it means for your season of life, because I see a truly innocent and honorable loyalty and trustworthiness in you. It's very evident in how you live your life. And I think this week with Noah's reading, one of the points that stood out to me the most, and the reason why I'm so encouraged is because it talks about all of these vices that when they lack ritual, or all of these virtues that when they lack ritual are actually vices. And you could read it like that, or you can read it in the inverse. Vices that when they are met with ritual, that when they are met with the right upbringing and temperance, actually become virtuous. And I see that in your life. And I see that loyalty and that trustworthiness and that rigidity turning into virtues. So I just wanted to share that as something I had noticed and even heard with some things that Emmanuel had used to say about you. And so I wanted to mention that, and to say that to me I was very touched at just how personal it was.
I want to come alongside what Jaden said, because I had forgotten that storyline I had to include in it. sounded to me like it was something personal to you, and I agree with what he's saying. You are very loyal, and you are a trustworthy person. And I don't say that just to say it. It is because, like Jaden said, it's the way that you're living. It's something I really appreciate, because we talk about in the ALX, like somebody who is choosing to live by that way, somebody who is, like, I guess, continuing the way, if that makes sense. But I really appreciate this poem because it shows both sides of something that I feel like makes us understand you, and something that is like an actual story.
You want to share some things out?
I could. But it might be time for Hattie.
Would you?
I think it's probably time for Hattie's poem now.
Gracious.
You're not gonna share it all, really?
I think it speaks for itself in many ways. I think I try to make it to where it wasn't relying on the story. So
I think you did very well.
thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to say as well. Since I kind of came on like right as you were finishing the poem, so sorry, my comment was a little kind of sounded like a joke, but I'm sorry. But I do remember that in words, and I think it is very applicable to your life because I think it really, like others have said, but it really explains who you are as a person. You're definitely the guy in the poem who would come to the bridge regardless, but I don't think it's because of some like ignorance. I think you're a very good representation of a genuine person and someone who stands up for what is right, more than me. I mean, I know we've had multiple instances where I'm always trying to slack off, and you keep a standard for things. And so I think that this poem is a very very good expression of who you are. So.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I guess Hattie's next. What's it called?
The Shield Children. I did kind of realize this isn't really a poem,
Define not really a poem. I think
but it's not really poetic.
you made it. Doesn't rhyme.
Okay, how do I feel the same?
I'm gonna say I don't feel like poetry has to be a narrow,
Yeah.
defined thing. For some reason, it's not loading for me. Modified 1122, huh?
That was quick, Hattie.
What was the name again?
1122.
Children.
I'm there. Sorry.
There were once two children, one of which had parents who would let no harm happen to them, catering to their every need and cautioning their endeavors. The other had completely different parents, who would allow them to get hurt and were seemingly careless. They lived very different lives. Life had left scars across one of them, and the other untouched. Once they matured and departed from the sheltering of their parents, their worlds changed. The child who had gone through many trials was already prepared for what the world was throwing at them, and knew how to dodge and fight through. But the child who remained untouched knew not how to fight what the world was throwing their way. The scarred child had felt unloved their whole life, wondering why their parents would let them get so hurt. But after being sent into the world, they realized what that was all along.
think this goes across things that we mentioned, or at least I feel like you can kind of resonate with, is the meaning of suffering and how suffering seems to be so, like, I don't know, I feel like we question suffering a lot. Why is this happening to me in the way it does? But when you can really understand that those things are for a reason, and like how suffering is like, I would personally say suffering is the main thing that kind of brings us outside of ourselves. And it's a really, I guess, good thing to understand that and appreciate that. And I like, at the end, you can say that like they realized what that was all along. They realized the burden was not just for a burden's sake. It was for a purpose.
What is? Oh, good. Sorry.
I was gonna say, what is endeavor? It's like
They're setting out. It's like they're
goals, I guess.
It's like to attempt to try to do something.
yeah.
You know.
Mhm.
Where did this idea come, or where did what inspired it for you? I guess. Was it like a story kind of thing, or was it like a thought that you originally had that you wanted to put into
Yeah. I mean, I had just been
an illustration?
that week just like thinking about like endurance, I guess. Or like more so how like raising children. And that's kind of what sparked it was.
What I'm kind of seeing here is like you have two different children that I would say both underwent an unideal way of being raised. So one, like opposite ends of the spectrum kind of thing. One wasn't just like not really cared for, but was actually mistreated in a way.
Mm-hmm.
But the other one was also mistreated in the sense that they were overprotected and sheltered. And this probably is a bit of a stretch, but it's reminded me of the conversation, and then I know you didn't intend this. It's reminded me of that distinction between native substance and cultural refinement, where you could see the equivalent of kind of the raw, kind of being left to, I don't know if you give a gender, herself, I'm guessing, left to herself kind of child versus the one that was pampered. That being like the native substance versus the cultural refinement.
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked a little bit about how native substance is actually somewhat preferred over cultural refinement because one is actually more teachable, is I guess the way you could summarize that. And shows that, and I don't really know how realistic this is, I'm just kind of speaking my thoughts out loud, but it's kind of showing that despite the unideal nature of both cases, the seemingly more negative experience with the first child is actually somewhat to be preferred in what the ultimate outcome ends up being, as you described it. Because the former is able to face the difficulties of life that any child was ever going to face inevitably much better than the one that was always seemingly treated very, very well. So I'm definitely applying my own framework to this, but I think it's your poem is general enough for anyone to be able to do that. But I would be interested in your more of your thoughts on it, and of obviously everyone else's.
made a similar interpretation. It actually reminds me of a conversation I was able to have with my parents just about parenting and things like that. And it was, I think, in how the Lord uses these unideal circumstances, as you said, with both of their childhoods, for an intentional reason. I think exactly with what you said, that the type of childhood described for that first child is unideal, but like you also said, is still capable of creating a native substance within that child, and a teachability within that child, and a humility within that child, because they have suffered. And it almost to me is reminiscent of the way that the Lord works generationally, because I think that through hardship and through unideal situations and even traumatic childhood, the Lord has an intent in that. And so those traumas and also those good things produced carry on through that child and with them into adulthood. And so then that they have children, and maybe different things are passed on, maybe some of the similar things, but there is and this is assuming that this child is pursuing the way, but there's a level of straining and of refinement to those things that the way I have seen it produces a slightly more filtered version of that childhood in their children. And so I think by starting in that very raw and rough and unideal spot, there is a creation and then a passing down on, where you have this native substance that is created through hardship and through suffering, but is then able to be passed down in a more optimal way, if you will. I don't know, all of that to say, I think there is something very cool about suffering and hardship being not necessarily intended, well, you could even say intended by the Lord, but for the sake of producing something. And how just because it's not optimal does not mean it was not intentional in creating something within you. Sorry if I was a little scattered there.
No, thank you.
I do think it's interesting that you paint a picture of two extremes without giving I feel like it's intentional that you didn't give an ideal situation, because I mean that wouldn't be very realistic, but like I feel like even though it seems as if the scarred child had it easier, they still had a kind of shield that, like, if I'm thinking about this example, I feel like it would still, both of them would still have an unhealthy perspective when they're sent out into the world.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, it seems as if the scarred child has it easier, but they're still seeing the world in a certain way, and I feel like they kind of shut themselves off. Like, this isn't using the poem very much, but I was just kind of taking my imagination to kind of play out this scenario that hasn't really been told. So I think the poem kind of points at how making this perfect greenhouse is kind of, it doesn't work very well when you don't prepare them. But I also see how the other extreme, although it has its benefits, isn't ideal, which has already been said. I that was just an interesting observation that I had that like wasn't highlighted. Yeah, I'm not sure what I was getting there. It's just a thought.
one way you could consider the difference between the two, because when I was saying unideal, it's like you obviously wouldn't want, say, your own child to be in either of those situations. So neither is being put as the way it should have been or the way it should be.
Mm-hmm.
But, and this is the only reason I had brought up the difference between native substance and cultural refinement, is one actually does enter the scene with more potential than the other. That's kind of like the key word you could use there, is potential. And no, I wouldn't see it as like a black and white thing. So in every case, you're going to have a person who's had a really difficult childhood have more potential than a person that has had a very pampered childhood. But I think on average, actually, there is a sorrow and a brokenness that definitely still needs to be mended and healed in a life, especially if it has occurred at very early age. But that has also brought a kind of wisdom by experience of sorts that makes it to where they do have, they are more teachable.
Mm-hmm.
They do have more potential to enter into a better kind of life that wasn't available to them at an earlier age. And there's much that is closed off and numbed to be able to receive that sort of life from the child that had it all. A child that never faced any kind of real difficulty and sorrow in life.
Mm-hmm.
So through the example of two children, you're kind of demonstrating what I think is a pretty universal principle of a person's development, even beyond childhood. Is sorrow does bring, sorrow opens the door for wisdom. Sorrow always opens the door for wisdom. It doesn't give you wisdom, it doesn't dispense wisdom, but it always brings you to the threshold of wisdom. And so this first child was closer to that threshold.
I just wanted to add something, and it's just maybe a different layer, but kind of the way I see it is it's actually the author or Hattie's realization of the sorrow that allows her to enter that door. So, like having too much or having too little, they're both a sorrow, they're both a hardship. So in one way, both of them. Do you see what I'm saying? Like having too much is also just as much of a hardship or I don't know. I just see both of them as equally tragic. But the beauty is that Hattie sees at the end maybe the realization of where she came from, which is where the open door comes. Am I making sense?
Mm-hmm. Is there anything you can add that we missed?
I don't know, I kind of wrote this in like, it's almost my gratitude for, even though unfortunate the way that my early childhood was.
Mm-hmm.
And like I remember I used to like look at my friends when I was little and I would be jealous because their parents would be like you poor thing, everything that would happen to them. But like I now realize that neither, like obviously I don't think the way I was raised was like good either, but I am very grateful that I did endure what I did, because I mean, like I said, it's like if you don't go through anything in your early childhood, you're not gonna know what to do when you're in the world. And So I don't know, I kind of just wrote this being grateful, though it did leave, obviously, problems. Like, I still have problems, but I'm still very grateful that I did go through what I did.
Very similar feelings for myself, both for you and for myself.
I believe that gratitude that you're experiencing now will actually increase rather than level out or decrease, because that's only going to be as far as you allow the Lord to continue to open the light of His ways in you, because it's not just something that allows you to see your current circumstances in a new way. It changes everything, your perception of everything. And there is I can only say this not because I throwing out there some spiritual principle, but because I've experienced it myself. There's a wealth of wisdom and encouragement that opens up to you from your past. I would say the more difficulty that you observe there, and everybody's difficulty is different. For me, I look back and see a lot of personal failure. I don't see like all these things were done to me. And I'm not saying you or anybody saying that. I'm just saying this is how it's different for other people. And seeing personal failure is really difficult to see any good in. But even that is something the Lord is able and has opened up for me, and is continuing to. Still, I don't see everything as perfectly redeemed yet, but that's a revealing that takes place over time, and in accordance to your own search for and submission to God's life in you. And so that's what I wanted to encourage you with this. I think it's beautiful that you're already seeing that, and you are going to see it more often and more clearly. Yeah.
I missed part, so if I say something that was repetitive, I had to take a phone call, but and this is really stretching it, so forgive me. But when you first started reading and I was reading with you, the first thing that came to my mind was the story of the prodigal son. Mm-hmm. And obviously there's a difference, because in this story we read the prodigal son chose, as Noah was even using his own testimony, made mistakes, said, I want my inheritance now, and then he squandered it. And then there's the brother who, when the prodigal son returns to the father, is pointing fingers at, but I've done everything you've told me to, and you're giving this guy the robe and the ring, and you're praising this guy just because he came home. So that's the two children in my mind when you were reading this, or when I was reading this with you. But but it's because of the end. Like, after being sent into the world, they realized what that was all along. And the what to me that stood out was what always gets me in the story, as the father running to the son. So, and obviously there was maybe a reprimand to the brother that was like, why is he getting these good things after all that he did? But that didn't change the love of the father for both sons. So no matter what we do endure, and it's not any coincidence, I don't think, that we just talked about the book of Job and y'all listened to the Bible's survey of one who was shown to be blameless. God still allowed these things because he knows the end. He knows what we must carry and endure to be made and to become a son of God. And yeah, we can beat ourselves up, because I think Noah's situation, what he's testifying to, may ring true to more of us, of the reality of the mistakes that we make, the choices that we make that are against the will of the Father, does not negate or change the love of the Father and the plan and the purpose that he has for us. which was orchestrated before the beginning of time, you know, like there's no changing that. He's not going to waver from that. His plan's not going to change because we misstep or, you know, anyway, I don't know. I just thought that was very interesting. So thank you for sharing, Addie.
We have left.
It's just me.
Who do you choose?
I tried to write a prose poem, but it's kind of more like a short story, so.
What's it called?
It's called The Listening Horse. You guys ready?
I am ready.
The pasture was enclosed, and though some of its inhabitants imagined escape, most, if not all, were happy. Their long bodies were covered in coats of beige, brown, red, and black. Their large heads bobbed and swayed when we played. Their hoofs were at times dancing, at other times still. They lived as horses should, with rest and play and even bickering. Every herd has pecking order. But more yet was coming. Soon all were paying attention, for a human had entered and was approaching a chestnut mare. She watched him, ears forward, staring. The man held up a contraption that, to some of the creatures, was familiar. The sight of it caused them to trot away. The human, speaking in low tones, lifted the halter over the red-brown nose, which, confused, only wriggled a little. But, while fastening the halter was no trouble, the horse became adamant when the man began to lead her. She flailed and bucked and tossed her head, stamping her feet and twisting about. Her friends watched, most becoming frightened. Was the human hurting her? She was led out of the paddock. A few steeds were bold enough to walk up to the gate, curiosity overcoming fear, watching and wondering if their friend would come back. The rest paced and whinnied anxiously, their thoughts similar, emotions behind them contrasted. The chestnut was returned, and she was released. The handler approached another horse. The spectacle was similar. This went on with all dozen horses. They grew of fear or anger towards the human and his halter. All except one. One just like the rest, a common bay in color. But his halter experience differed from the rest. He, at first, resisted it, having watched several go before him. He tried it all, kicking, rearing, bolting, even spinning. But something brought him to a stop. This halt led him to consider following the pull of the lead rope, and he found its tug quite gentle. His companions were astonished when he was led back in easily, having walked about for a while like the rest, and was even given a pat after the halter was taken off. What brought the handler to treat him with such favor? The following day, the man returned, halter once again in hand. This time, he took the bay gelding first, and led him somewhere new. Tying the lead rope to a pole, he walked up to the horse's shoulder. The gelding watched him, carefully, not fearfully. The man put his hand on the animal's sleek coat, and slid it all the way down to the back of his leg, finally taking a hold of his hoof. The gelding stood very still, watching, waiting. The human pulled, gently, at his hoof, and the horse lifted it in response. The man soothed him with kind tones, and held his hoof lightly, using a metal tool to scrape at it. It was strange, but it did not hurt, and the gelding continued to stand quietly as the man worked, still talking to him. After having done this to each hoof, he took the bay back to the pasture and haltered another, who struggled fiercely due to his past suffering in the halter. The lot did the same, but the man continued to work with the horses who would allow him to halter, which became few, for they grew to expect him and ran from him. But the bay gelding ran towards him, and as time passed, more of the horses learned to do the same, for they found out they didn't have to resist him.
I see a lot of similarities from the what are we doing?
Harness of the Lord, I'm guessing.
Harness of the Lord, yes. Is that where some of the inspiration is from, maybe?
Yes, for sure.
I saw it. I think it was cool how you kind of used the same like picture almost, but had a different story, but it still applied super well to the principle of a different kind of freedom, a freedom that is given to us by the leading of God. That was really cool. I really liked the imagery you did there. It was very very. It made it very easy to imagine, I guess, into a very clear picture.
Mm. Definitely is very like a reflexive, I guess, or how do you say that? Like it inspires in me a lot of inner reflection about, you know, even where I am here in this, you know, enclosed pasture. And I could appreciate going through the story while you're reading it and kind of like taking different positions of the horses, like the ones observing outside where, you know, they're watching the one being dealt with by the human and coming back and all the like the different experiences, and also like being the one that would run to the human at the end there. I think it's, I don't know, I love poetry that kind of takes you along with it, you know. And yeah, I really felt that with this. So I appreciate the way that you also revealed the heart of the horseman, I guess, you know, through it, where he seems kind of like just this character, you know, that's stern and stubborn, but at the end, you know, for the one that comes to him, he's very receptive and ready to teach. Yeah, it's cool.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm sure we all appreciate the familiarity and expertise you have with horses. So your terminology obviously is like shows that you understand and even have firsthand experience with this stuff. So it's always a very wise thing to use in creative writing something like, yes, it can be like an experience you actually partook in, but even if it's like a skill or something that you in particular are well versed in, to use that as like substance for your or the content for your creative writing, also poetry or essays, whatever it is. Because it's not just the fact that you have a more advanced vocabulary in the subject than other people, but also you know the dynamics of the ins and outs of them, and so you're able to take what's near at hand as an analogy. So like I can imagine someone like Benji, at least maybe I bet he could do so now, but I'm sure he would do so even better later on and be able to. It'd be interesting to see how you would do this, but be able to take like working with cars and manipulate that to express some kind of message, some sort of deeper meaning, and not do so in an artificial way, because you actually have to care about what you're talking about in order to use it in a way that is heartfelt, in a way that touches others' hearts. I can see someone like Emma or a few others being able to use something like the experience of doing art, for instance. And then we all have our different, our different things. But that's like material for you that's always there, is what I'm kind of saying. Another thing I wanted to mention too is, yes, it does kind of lean more towards the short story format, but even as you were reading, I was like kind of trying to think about how this could be pieced together differently or slimmed down a little bit to come across as a true prose poem. And it would be very simple to do that. I think you could definitely make that work. It would be heavy editing, but it wouldn't be hard editing.
I already had shortened it from the original draft.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So, I'm not a good enough poet to be able to do editing on the spot.
It's
but
because I write fiction, so when I'm writing something in a story form, it comes a lot more
Sure,
like prose-like than poetry.
So, like giving you some simple stuff, and this is for everybody to keep in mind when it comes to prose poetry, because prose poetry is really cool. And I've shared some examples, and it's always good to look at examples. But, yes, it is kind of in between, like the concise form of that poetry tends to have, or the flowing song-like form that poetry tends to have. In between that and like more of what we have here, like a short story kind of form and flow or read. So one thing that you could do is like more line breaks. Like line breaks are not a completely artificial thing. They do have simply to do with the form that your poem appears in. But that extends to how it's read, even in another person's mind, like not just out loud, but in their mind. They read it differently depending on how you line break. So line breaks can be powerful. So how you separate things into stanzas is one thing. And there's a lot here that you could slim down even further, so that you turn it from what's like a sentence with all of its commas and its conjunctions, like and, for, or, yet, but, so, whatever it is. And you extract as much of that as you can. So yes, it does start to make it a little bit more ambiguous, so like it causes the reader to have to stretch themselves a little bit, but that's what poetry is supposed to do in the first place. And it makes it to where the line breaks make more sense, and it starts to flow a little bit more too. So if this particular writing mattered to you enough, this is not an assignment to you, but I think you could definitely turn it into a true prose poem for sure.
Yeah, those are inspiring tips. I want to do it.
Yes, I hope that would turn out for you, because that would be very neat. And I think it would actually it would elevate the meaning that you're trying to get across, because it would actually be presented in a more vague way. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, but that leaves a lot more room for the reader's imagination to extend it to different areas of their own mind and heart. So that would be cool. Yeah. Overall, you still did a good job. Anyone else? Some of you have not said a single word. I'm just teasing you.
I'm guessing the gelding is like a young male horse.
It's
Would that be equivalent with Or would that be the male equivalent to a mare?
Yeah, so like a gelding is a stallion that's not a stallion, because a stallion like mates with mares and stuff like that. So a gelding is just a stallion that doesn't mate.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like, there's so many words for
And often they're
livestock.
not as like spirited as
I see.
stallions. Yeah.
So it's not like the chief kind of.
Yeah, it's yeah.
That's one word. Or like the bull among cows kind of thing. Yeah. Interesting. Nobody else? Okay, now I can give you the next assignment. So, I would usually do an essay at this point, but you guys are writing one, so I don't want to overload you.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Just these. I'm gonna do another poem, and this one's gonna be cool because it is inspired by Benji, and he's just such a. No, I'm just kidding. Benji had sent me his poem and then said, I was listening to this song while writing it, and I think you should listen to it while you read it. It's like, okay. So that's your assignment is you can write a poem about anything, but it has to be the only requirement is that it must be influenced by, directly and openly influenced by a song. But I'm going to give you some requirements for the song. The song can't have words, because that would just kind of be, I know that's going to be an upset for some of you, but it has to be an instrumental of some kind. It can't be a song with words.
Understood.
So, it can be very sober, deep, it can be playful, but it has to match with your song somehow.
Can we like play the music as well?
No. I think that would be a little awkward. I'm just imagining that.
In that case, though, I think what you should do.
You guys would be laughing the entire time.
I think what you could do though, what would be cool, is if like people could either like in the title or somewhere in your poem just include the name of the song.
Yeah, I was gonna get there.
Okay.
So, you guys, what I want you to do is everyone needs to share their poem eventually when you have it finished on the Culture Center group chat. But you're not. I would prefer and strongly advise you not to post your entire poem on there. Post a link, like your Google Docs or whatever.
Hey, I was gonna say, do you want us to send it to the group chat or just upload it to the drive?
Well, the reason I want you to do that is because adjacent to that, with that text, you are going to share your song. So, you have a slightly less time to write this. It is due Wednesday, not tomorrow, but a week from tomorrow. So that's when it is by the end of that day that your poem and its song should be sent on the group text, okay? The reason you have a little bit less time is because following that, up to Tuesday, you are to have everyone's poem read and listened to song. So following Wednesday, you have Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday to read and listen. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And so this is another difficulty you're going to encounter, which if you just use a little bit of your brain, it's not a difficulty. But some of you guys use Apple Music, some of you guys use Spotify. If you don't have one or the other, you type in the name of the song into the app you do use, and then they'll be okay. Don't push on the thing and say, "Hi, I don't have Spotify." Just type the song into Apple Music.
People could also share YouTube links.
Yeah, YouTube is an option too, but yeah, you can do that. That's it. I look forward to it. It's gonna be kind of fun.